Nobody believed he could do it. No money, no resources, just a dream so impossible, so far-fetched, that even his closest friends told him to give up. But he refused. In a tiny village where children walked miles just to fetch water, where books were a luxury, and where education was a distant dream, one man dared to change everything. His name? Rajan. A simple man. No degree, no connections, no wealth, just a heart that couldn't bear to see children growing up without a chance. One evening, as Rajan sat under a dim streetlight, he watched a group of kids playing in the dirt. They weren't laughing, they weren't running, they were drawing letters in the dust. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. A boy, no older than 7, smiled shyly. "My sister used to go to school before it closed." Rajan felt something stir deep inside him. The school had closed years ago. No teachers, no funding, no hope. The nearest school was miles away, and no one in the village could afford to send their children there. So they remained, trapped in the cycle of poverty. That night, Rajan made a decision that would change everything. He would build a school. But how? With what? He had no land, no money, no one backing him. Everyone laughed. "A school?" they said. "How will you do that when you can barely afford food?" But Rajan didn't argue. He simply started. At dawn, he walked to an empty patch of land, just a dusty clearing, nothing more. He took a stick, bent down, and drew a rectangle in the dirt. "This," he whispered, "will be my classroom." Then he knocked on doors. One by one, he visited every home in the village, asking parents to send their children to him for lessons. Some slammed their doors, some laughed in his face, but one woman, an elderly grandmother, stepped forward. "I will send my grandson," she said. "If he can learn, maybe he can change our future." And so the first student arrived. Just one boy, no desk, no chair, no roof over their heads, just Rajan sitting on the ground, teaching a single child with a broken piece of chalk and a heart full of fire. But something incredible was about to happen. Something no one expected. Word spread quickly. The next day, another child joined, then another. Within a week, 5 children sat cross-legged on the dusty ground, their eyes wide with curiosity, their hands eager to learn. But the village elders were skeptical. "What are you doing, Rajan?" they asked. "This is foolish. A school needs money, a school needs walls." Rajan only smiled. "A school needs students first," he said. Day by day, he taught whatever he could. Basic math, simple words, stories he had heard as a child. He had no books, no blackboard, no supplies. But he had his voice, and he used it like a flame, lighting up minds that had been left in the dark for too long. Then came the first real challenge, monsoon season. The rains were brutal. The open patch of land turned into a muddy swamp. Water filled the small learning space, washing away everything they had drawn in the dirt. The children shivered under the cold sky, their clothes soaked, their feet caked in mud. Some parents pulled their children out. "This isn't a school," they said. "It's a disaster." For the first time, Rajan felt doubt creep in. Had he made a mistake? Was he asking for too much? Then one morning, as he sat alone in the rain, thinking about giving up, he heard a voice. "I want to learn." It was the little boy, the first student. He stood there, barefoot, drenched, shivering, but determined. "I don't care about the rain," the boy said. "I want to learn." And just like that, Rajan's doubt vanished. If this child wouldn't give up, neither would he. So he found a solution. He borrowed a torn plastic sheet from a neighbor and tied it between 2 trees. It wasn't much, but it kept the rain off their heads. When he ran out of chalk, He used white stones to write on flat rocks. When the children had no paper, he showed them how to carve letters into the mud with sticks. He refused to stop. And then something unexpected happened. A passing traveller, a schoolteacher from a neighbouring town, saw them learning under the plastic sheet. He was shocked. "You have no walls, no books, no desks, yet you teach?" Rajan simply nodded. The traveller smiled. "Wait here." The next morning he returned, with an armful of books. It was the first real breakthrough. But what happened next was even bigger. The books changed everything. For the first time, the children weren't just listening to stories, they were reading them. They weren't just memorizing numbers, they were solving problems. Their fingers traced over words, their minds racing ahead, hungry for more. And the village noticed. Parents who once doubted Rajan now watched as their children came home, proudly reciting the alphabet, teaching their younger siblings, showing off simple math equations scratched into the dirt. But not everyone was impressed. The village chief, a man of power and tradition, saw Rajan's growing influence as a threat. "This is not how things are done," he said. "Education costs money. If you can't afford a proper school, you shouldn't be teaching." Rajan took a deep breath. "Then tell me, Chief, should these children remain uneducated just because they are poor?" The chief had no answer, but he had power. One morning, Rajan arrived to find his makeshift classroom destroyed, the plastic sheet torn, the books soaked in water, the children's learning space reduced to nothing. A warning. The message was clear: stop, or things will get worse. Rajan sat on the ground, staring at the mess. His heart pounded, his hands trembled. He had sacrificed everything for this, and now it was gone. But before he could even process what had happened, he heard footsteps. One by one, the children arrived. They didn't cry, they didn't complain. They simply picked up their ruined books, wiped the pages dry with their tiny hands, and sat down. "We can still learn," one of them said. Rajan looked at their faces, determined, resilient, and he knew he couldn't stop now. So he stood up, dusted himself off, and did something no one expected. He marched straight to the chief's house. What happened next would change everything. Rajan stood outside the chief's house, rain dripping from his hair, fists clenched. The chief's guards blocked the entrance, but Rajan didn't flinch. "I need to speak with him," he said, his voice steady. The chief appeared at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold. "You don't belong here, Rajan. Go back to your broken school." But Rajan didn't move. "I have nothing," he admitted. "No money, no power, no land. But these children, they have something far more valuable. They have the will to learn, and you tried to take that from them?" The chief laughed. "And what will you do about it? Beg? Fight me?" Rajan took a deep breath. Then he spoke words no one had ever dared to say to the chief before. "You say education costs money, that it requires walls and desks, but tell me, what did you pay to learn how to speak, to count, to think?" The chief's expression flickered. Rajan took a step closer. "Knowledge is not something you buy, it's something you share, and you can't stop what's already started." The guards exchanged glances. The villagers, who had gathered to watch, whispered among themselves. And then something unbelievable happened. A voice rose from the crowd. "He's right." Another. "My son is learning." Then another. "My daughter can read now." One by one, the villagers stepped forward. Men, women, elders, mothers holding their children's hands. "We will not stop him. We will help him." The chief's face darkened, but he saw it now. He had already lost. Rajan had no money, no power, no permission. But he had something far greater. He had the people, and together they did the impossible. The shift was unstoppable. The same villagers who once doubted Rajan were now his strongest supporters. The fathers who had once pulled their children away now carried bricks. The mothers who had said education was a luxury now stitched cloth to make shade from the sun. They built a school, not with money but with hands, hearts, and determination. They used bamboo for walls, old wooden planks for benches. A torn bedsheet became a blackboard, and leftover charcoal replaced chalk. It wasn't much, but to them it was everything. And then news travelled. A journalist from the city, hearing about a man who had built a school with no money, came to see it for himself. He was stunned. "These children," he whispered, watching them read from second-hand books, their fingers carefully tracing over letters. "They are learning, against all odds." He took pictures, he wrote their story, and when it was published, the world saw what a single man had done with nothing but determination. Donations poured in. A businessman donated a proper chalkboard. A retired teacher sent in books. A local carpenter built desks and chairs. And then, one day, a letter arrived. Rajan opened it with shaking hands. His eyes widened. It was from the Ministry of Education. A government officer soon visited the village, astonished by what he saw. "You've done what we failed to do for years," he admitted. And then he made an announcement. The government would officially recognize the school. It would receive funding, proper materials, even a permanent building. Rajan could hardly believe it. He had started with nothing, a single child, a handful of students in the dirt, a plastic sheet against the rain, and now he had built something that would outlive him. But the most important moment came later. One day, as Rajan sat under a tree, watching children run through the schoolyard, a familiar voice spoke. "Sir?" He turned. It was the first student, the little boy who had once stood in the rain, refusing to give up. Only now he wasn't so little anymore. "I'm going to college," the boy said, smiling. "Because of you." Rajan felt a lump in his throat. This was why he had fought, not for recognition, not for rewards, but for this moment, for a child who had once had nothing to now have everything. And that is the power of never giving up.